everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deeper into Different Brains. I'm Emily Buckley, and this episode we're going to go into the different video resources that Different Brains offers on the topic of addiction. Our first video this week is an interview with our very own Dr. Haki Reitman and Professor Bengal Johnson dealing with the battle of the opioid crisis. Let's get into it.
The best advice is that if you feel you have a problem with addiction, that you should see your family practitioner, your doctor. And the reason is, your family practitioner or doctor will be able to take a full physical and medical history from you and be able to determine whether you need appropriate treatment. One of the other things we found is that most individuals who have an addiction have all sorts of other disorders that are not being attended to, whether it's their heart, their lungs, with their blood pressure or diabetes. And so getting a good health check is important. The best message for hope is that addictive disorders are treatable and people do get better. And worrying about being stigmatized by going to see your doctor is the wrong worry. It is better to be treated and well than to die of ignorance or to be harmed by ignorance. So it's much better to go to your doc and get the treatment.
Next up, we have another interview with Dr. Haki Reitman and Professor Bengal Johnson about thinking differently about treating alcoholism.
It's not just the neurological issues, it's not just the developmental issues, it's not just the mental health issues, it's everything from autism to Alzheimer's and all brains in between. And you have a handle on that, and you see the commonality in the approach to much of this.
Yes, well, I think one of the interesting things that has emerged as we have understood neuroplasticity more is that the borders between what most people call physical versus mental disorders in the brain are actually quite intertwined, and they tend to be co-localized. So one of the analogies that I gave in our last meeting was of the guy who had a punch on his head, and that the swelling of the brain could be due to why the person became depressed. Well, it's also possible that the psychological effects of being punched in the brain are pretty negative, and somebody would want to have that happen to them again. But it shows you how intertwined they are, and they're intertwined in so many ways. The most important terms of the intertwining in recent times has been all the work in pain and addiction. Pain and addiction are represented by areas of the brain that are sort of co-localized. So it is not unusual for somebody to have a painful condition, be given too many opiates, and become addicted because they're represented in the same part of the brain.
Next up, we have our third interview with Professor Bengal Johnson about debunking the myths of alcoholism and addiction.
It's really very sad. If you come to some of these clinics and you see the level of suffering, and you see people who are desperate, and you see individuals who have opiate use, and it's generational. Son is an addict, dad is an addict, mom is an addict. I mean, it's really, really, it's a level of human suffering that you have to do anything about if you're any kind of a humanitarian, let alone just a doctor.
And our final interview with Professor Bengal Johnson is about treating addiction through neuroscience breakthroughs.
Well, one of the interesting things that we've learned in neurodiversity is, and here's another myth that has come that I would love to dispel for you, is that everybody's brain is the same. Everybody's brain is not the same. It's not even close. And in fact, part of the problem is we all process information slightly differently. We may all, depending on our genetic makeup, develop different types of signaling pathways in response to different types of sensations. And therefore, everybody's brain is not the same. That's why the path for medicine into the future is this aspect of personalized medicine, because we finally realized that you can't treat everyone the same and expect to get the same result, and that treatments need to be individualized. And we have very powerful tools at the present time for individualizing medical practice. The question is, how long is it going to take us to educate all doctors to be able to do this?
Our next video is an interview with Jan Tedeschi about assessing whether addiction is a form of neurodiversity.
It's so apparent that people really don't understand addiction as a disease, let alone a brain disease. Again, we're still torn with that. It's a choice, and it's a behavioral choice, which, yes, there are behavioral changes that need to occur, but that is true of most diseases.
Next up, let's take a look at all the different news resources that Different Brains has on addiction.
Next up, check out how an Indiana gym is helping people recover from addiction.
Big Time Barbell in Muncie, a nonprofit getting recovery addicts off drugs and instead hooked on fitness.
That was the only downfall that I've ever heard about our program, is that we were trading one addiction for the other. It's like comparing apples to buzzsaws.
The gym is open 24 hours, supported by city and county grants, as well as public memberships, a portion of those.
We put in a general scholarship program for a veteran or somebody that has suffered some addiction issues.
Actor James Franco recently discussed his past battles with addiction and depression in Out magazine.
So I hope that watching these video resources gave you a little bit of a better understanding into the topic of addiction. I'll be linking all the different video interviews and news resources below, and you can click on the links. It'll take you directly to those videos on our website. I hope you enjoyed this week. Our next episode is going to feature all the different blog and audio resources that Different Brains offers on the topic of addiction. So see you next time. For more information, visit us at differentbrains.org.